All right, let's talk about the U.S. Federal Reserve. It's one of the most powerful economic institutions on the planet, and its decisions, well, they affect all of us. But here's the thing. What happens when the economy starts playing by a new set of rules, but the Fed's playbook is stuck in the past? That's what we're diving into.
So this is the central puzzle we need to unpack. On one hand, you've got clear signs the economy is hitting the brakes. But on the other, the Fed seems, well, stuck. It's like they can't use their biggest tool, cutting interest rates, without breaking their own rules. It's a real case of policy paralysis. So how on earth did we get here?
It all boils down to this thing called the Fed's dual mandate. For decades, their entire job has been this delicate balancing act. Keep prices stable and make sure as many people as possible have jobs. Sounds simple enough, right? Well, the whole argument we're exploring today is that our very definitions of stable prices and maximum employment might be dangerously out of date.
Okay, first up, let's tackle the price stability part of that mandate. For years, the Fed's whole strategy has been built around one single magic number.
And that number is 2%. Ever since they made it official back in 2012, targeting 2% inflation has been the absolute bedrock of Fed policy. Every decision, every press conference, it all comes back to hitting this one very specific target. But here's the problem. The economy just isn't playing by that rule anymore.
And this chart right here shows you that disconnect perfectly. See that flat dashed line? That's the Fed's target, their goal, 2%. But that jagged blue line? That's reality. That's what inflation has actually been doing. And you can see since 2021, it has just stubbornly hovered way closer to 3%. The argument is that this isn't some temporary blip, it's a real structural shift in the economy.
Sticking to an old 2% target creates this huge strategic problem for the Fed, and it's called the zero lower bound. Just think of it this way. When the economy gets into trouble, the Fed's main superpower is cutting interest rates to get people spending again. But you can't cut rates below zero. It's a hard floor. You hit a wall.
And this is a brilliant illustration of why that wall matters so much. With a 2% inflation target, you just don't have that much room to cut before you smack into zero. But, as this research proposes, if you aim for 3% inflation instead, you start from a higher point. That extra 1% or 100 basis points is absolutely crucial policy space. It's like starting a long car trip with a bigger gas tank. You just have more fuel to deal with whatever comes your way.
So that's the inflation side of the story. But the problems, they don't stop there. Now let's pivot to the second half of the mandate and talk about rethinking what maximum employment even means in today's world.
The core idea here is that the job market we have today is just different. It's not the same machine it was a couple of decades ago. For one, you've got this incredible acceleration of technology. AI, automation, creating a mismatch. The jobs that are open don't always line up with the skills people have. And second, there are what economists call new frictions. Basically, the whole process of matching the right person to the right job has gotten clunkier and less efficient.
Now, I know this beverage curve chart looks a little intimidating, but the idea is actually pretty simple. Think of it as a report card on the job market's efficiency. The old curve, that dashed line, that was the before picture. You had a certain number of job openings, and that led to a lower level of unemployment. But look at the new curve, the solid one. It's shifted outward. That means for the exact same number of job vacancies today, we have a higher rate of unemployment. The job matching engine just isn't working as well as it used to.
Okay, so let's just recap for a second. We have an inflation target that feels out of touch and a view of full employment that doesn't really fit the modern world. So what's the solution? Well, this research proposes it's time for a whole new set of targets. And here it is, laid out plain and simple. This slide shows the proposed shift. On the left, that's the old playbook. Target 2% inflation and figure full employment is around 4% unemployment. On the right, that's the new proposal. Raise that inflation target to 3% and accept that the new full employment rate is actually closer to 4.5% or 5%. It's a direct response to all those structural changes we've been talking about. And this table just puts the entire argument in a nutshell. For price stability, you move the target to 3%. Why? Well, it aligns policy with reality, and it restores that crucial buffer we talked about, that extra fuel in the tank. And for employment, it means raising the unemployment target to between 4.5% and 5%, basically acknowledging the new, less efficient reality of the job market. So look, this isn't just some academic debate for economists to argue about. Adopting these new targets would have immediate, real-world consequences for the economy, for markets, and for what the Fed actually does next.
So what's the bottom line? Why does this really matter? First, it gives the Fed more power, more effective tools to fight the next downturn. Second, it unlocks immediate action. If 3% is your target, current inflation doesn't look nearly as scary, which gives the Fed a clear reason to consider lowering rates to help the economy right now. And finally, it just aligns the Fed's playbook with economic reality, which is absolutely crucial for its credibility.
And all of this brings us to one final powerful thought. The proposal we've examined today argues that we are living in a fundamentally new economic era. The basic structures of both inflation and employment have shifted, and so it leaves us with a really provocative question. If the game itself has changed, isn't it time to rewrite the rules?